"If McWing really and conscientiously admired my book for itself," I began. "Oh, why should you imagine he does not?" asked Lucio. "Myself, I believe that he is a perfectly sincere and honorable man. I think he means all he says and writes. I consider that if he found your work not worthy of his commendation, he would have sent me back that check for £500, torn across in a noble scorn." And with this, throwing himself back in his chair, he laughed till tears came into his eyes. But I could not laugh. I was too weary and depressed. A heavy sense of despair was on my mind. I felt that the hope which had cheered me in my days of poverty, the hope of winning real fame, so wildly different a thing to notoriety, had vanished. There was some quality in the subtle glory which could not be won by either purchase or influence. The praise of the press could not give it. Mavis Clare, working for her bread, had it. I, with millions of money, had not. Like a fool, I had thought to buy it, and I had yet to learn that all the best, greatest, purest, and worthiest things in life are beyond all market value, and that the gifts of the gods are not for sale. About a fortnight after the publication of my book, we went to court, my comrade and I, and were presented by a distinguished officer connected with the immediate and intimate surroundings of the royal household. It was a brilliant scene enough, but, without doubt, the most brilliant personage out there was Romanes. I was fairly startled at the stately and fascinating figure he made in his court suit of black velvet and steel ornaments, accustomed as I was to his good looks. I'd never seen them so enhanced by dress as on this occasion. I had been tolerably well satisfied with my own appearance in the regulation costume till I saw him. Then my personal vanity suffered a decided shock, and I realized that I merely served as a foil to show off and accentuate the superior attractions of my friend. But I was not envious of him in any way. On the contrary, I openly expressed the admiration I frankly felt. He seemed amused. "My dear boy, it is all flunkeydom," he said, "all sham and humbug. Look at this," and he drew his light court rapier from its sheath. "There's no real use in this flimsy blade. It is merely an emblem of dead chivalry. In old times, if a man insulted you, or insulted a woman you admired, or outflashed a shining point of tempered Toledo steel that could lunge, so," and he threw himself into a fencing attitude of incomparable grace and ease, "and you pricked the blackguard neatly through the ribs or the arm, and gave him cause to remember you. But now," and he thrust the rapier back in its place, "men carry toys like these as a melancholy sign to show what bold fellows they were, and what spiritless cravens they are now, relying no more on themselves for protection, but content to go about yelling 'Police! Police!' at the least threat of injury to their worthless persons. Come, it's time we started, Geoffrey. Let us go and bow our heads before another human unit, formed precisely like ourselves, and so act in defiance of death and the deity, who declare all men to be equal." We entered our carriage and were soon on our way to St. James's Palace. "His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales is not exactly the creator of the universe," said Lucio suddenly, looking out the window as we approached the line of soldiery on guard outside. "Why, no," I answered, laughing. "But what do you say that for?" "Because there is such a fuss about him, as if he were, in fact, more. The Creator does not get half as much attention bestowed upon him as Albert Edward. We never attire ourselves in any special way for entertaining the presence of God. We don't put so much as a clean mind on. But then," I said indifferently, "God is non est, and Albert Edward is est." He smiled, and his eyes had a scornful gleam in their dark centers. "That is your opinion?" he queried. "Well, it is not original. Many choice spirits share it with you. There is at least one good excuse for people who make no preparation to enter the presence of God. In going to church, which is called the house of God, they do not find God at all. They only discover the clergyman. It is somewhat of a disappointment." I had no time to reply, as just then the carriage stopped and we alighted at the palace. Through the intervention of the high court official who presented us, we got a good place among the most distinguished arrivals, and during our brief wait I was considerably amused by the study of their faces and attitudes. Some of the men looked nervous, others conceited, One or two radical notabilities comported themselves with an air as if they and they alone were to be honored for allowing royalty to hold these functions at all. A few gentlemen had evidently donned their levee dress in haste and carelessness, for pieces of tissue paper in which their steel or gilt coat buttons had been wrapped by the tailor to prevent tarnish were still unremoved. Discovering this fortunately before it was too late, they occupied themselves by taking off these papers and casting them on the floor, an untidy process at best, and one that made them look singularly ridiculous and undignified. Each man present turned to stare at Lucio. His striking personality attracted universal attention. When we at last entered the throne room and took our places in line, I was careful to arrange that my brilliant companion should go up before me, as I had a strong desire to see what sort of effect his appearance should produce on the royal party. I had an excellent view of the Prince of Wales from where I myself waited. He made an imposing and kingly figure enough, in full uniform with his various orders glittering on his broad breast, and the singular resemblance discovered by many people in him to Henry VIII struck me more forcibly than I should have thought possible. His face, however, expressed a far greater good humour than the pictured lineaments of the capricious but ever popular buff King Hal, though at this occasion there was a certain shade of melancholy, even sternness, on his brow, which gave a firmer character to his naturally mobile features. A shadow, as I fancied, of weariness, tempered with regret, the look one dissatisfied yet resigned. A man of blunted possibilities he seemed to be to me, of defeated aims and thwarted will. Few of the other members of the royal family surrounding him on the dais possessed the remarkable attraction he had for any observant study of physiognomy. Most of them were, or assumed to be, stiff military figures merely who bent their heads as each guest filed past with a guest filed past. Most of them were or assumed to be stiff military figures, merely who bent their heads as each guest filed past with an automatic machine-gun-like regularity, implying neither pleasure, interest, nor goodwill, but the heir apparent to the greatest empire in the world expressed in his very attitude and looks an unaffected and courteous welcome to all, surrounded as he was, and as such in his position must ever be, by toadies, parasites, sycophants, hypocritical self-seekers, who would never run the least risk in their own lives to serve him, unless they could get something personally satisfactory out of it. His presence impressed itself upon me as full of the suggestion of dormant, but none the less resolute power. I cannot even now explain the singular excitation of mind that seized me as our turn to be presented arrived. I saw my companion advance, and heard the Lord Chamberlain announce his name, Prince Lucio Romanez, and then, it seemed as if all the movement in the brilliant room suddenly came to a pause. Every eye was fixed on the stately form and noble countenance of my friend as he bowed with such consummate courtliness and grace as made all the other salutations seem awkward by comparison. For one moment he stood absolutely still in front of the royal dais, facing the prince as though he sought to impress him with the fact of his presence there, and across the broad stream of sunshine which had been pouring into the room throughout the ceremony there fell the sudden shadow of a passing cloud. A fleeting impression of gloom and silence chilled the atmosphere. A singular magnetism appeared to hold all eyes fixed on Romanez, and not a man either going or coming moved. The intense hush was brief as it was curious and impressive. The Prince of Wales started slightly and gazed at the superb figure before him with an expression of eager curiosity, and almost as if he were ready to break the frigid bonds of etiquette and speak. Then, controlling himself with an evident effort, he gave his usual dignified acknowledgment of Lucio's profound reverence, whereupon my comrade passed on, slightly smiling. I followed next, but naturally made no impression beyond the fact of exciting a smothered whisper from someone among the lesser royalties, who caught the name Geoffrey Tempest, and at once murmured the magic words, 5 millions, words which reached my ear and moved me with the usual weary contempt, which was with me growing into a chronic malady. We were soon out of the palace, and while waiting for a carriage in the covered courtyard entrance, I touched Romanes on the arm. Did you make a veritable You made a veritable sensation, Lucio. Did I? He laughed. You flatter me, Geoffrey. Not at all. Why did you stop so long in front of the dais? To please my humor, he returned indifferently, and partly to give his Royal Highness the chance of remembering me the next time he sees me. But he seemed to recognize you, I said. Have you met him before? His eyes flashed. Often, but I have never till now made a public appearance at St. James's Court. Court costume and company manners makes a difference to the looks of most men, and I very much doubt whether, even with his reputed excellent memory for faces, the prince really knew me today for what I am. End of chapter 16 of The Sorrows of Satan.